Crown of Maine is a distribution company, and my family started, my mother Kate and my father Jim started on our farm in 1994. We had moved up north to Aroostook County to farm organically and realized that it was going to be very hard to sell the produce from our farm in the local area. It's a very small population, and so we would load up the family passenger van, and every other week my dad would drive down to Boston and sell to chefs.
As my dad and my mom were going down the road, they started working with other family farmers who were producing similar quality and who were doing similar production practices. And that started building the pathway. And Northern Girl is a little bit of the same thing. I'm Leah Cook, and I'm the president of Northern Girl, which is a processing and packaging company that packages up local foods. We take in products that are grown in Aroostook County up north in Maine, and by the time we're done running it through our line, they've been cleaned, peeled, processed, packed. So what goes out the door is food that can be used by food service in institutions or in the home.
We have a tremendous potential to grow things in Maine, and our ability to eat them fresh out of the field is limited. So we have to think of ways to make the growing potential that we have into staples that we can eat all year round. There's a big gulf, a huge gulf, between what might come from a dozen different family farms and what can be delivered every single day of the week on a truck. And part of Crown of Maine's role in the local food system is to be nimble enough to navigate that gulf.
Murata's in the office, and all summer she's going to be in the office on the phone. She's going to be talking to farmers who have green onions, or they have strawberries, or they have lettuce or whatever. And all summer she's going to just call people and ask them what they need, if they can use this. She's going to find homes for it. That's the way you go from a family van full of potatoes to this year we're on track to sell $2 million worth of Maine products.
The reason we take the approach that we do is because if you just think of products as things that can have SKUs and barcodes on them, it changes completely the way you think about people. I'd like to see, like with all the businesses I do, I'd like to see the people dynamic advance with the product dynamic. I don't just want to feed people, I want to see them engage.
Welcome to Northern Girl, to Van Buren. I grew up in the next town over, and Northern Girl kind of came to be because I grew up in a potato barn, and we were grading for really high quality table stock potatoes, and my mother just felt like it was a shame that we were constantly throwing out good potatoes because they had cosmetic blemishes. I think a lot of you, are familiar with that context and may have started in a similar viewpoint of how can a farmer get more value for more of their crop. When my parents originally thought of what became Northern Girl, they were thinking about dicing potatoes and packing them in buckets of water to sell to the University of Maine. The town of Van Buren applied for a grant to get funds to build a building, and they needed a tenant in order to qualify. So they asked my dad, and my dad said, yeah, sure. Didn't really have a business, didn't exist at the time. But he put his name down on it. They were awarded the grant funds to build this building that we're in now, but by the time they did that, our father had passed away. Murata and I took over the distribution business, and we inherited this sort of opportunity, and we then had to go and figure out what is the actual plan that goes with this opportunity. That's how Chris came to our door. He found us through the Slow Money Maine network, and together with him, we started working on the Van Buren project. Northern Girl is his idea for a name. Rod and I probably would never have called it that, but it totally made sense once we got going. The town built the building. They did it most of the way to where it needed to be. And as a former farm kid, I can tell you there's nothing better than having a new building and having new equipment to play with. It's a big delight after old potato barns. But we did have to do a substantial amount of fit up to make it suitable for food processing grade. I don't know what your buildings are like where you are, but having been in a lot of old buildings, they put the FRP paneling, they installed that on the walls, but they didn't seal any one of those seams. So that's something the summer before we moved in here, we had to do that ourselves. The floor, which is a non-slip, food-safe floor, we had that installed ourselves. So it was a big investment on our part, even with the essentially free money to build the building. And it was a big investment of time, particularly for Chris, to figure out the project management and get everything ready to move from the former Loring Air Force Base, where we set up our pilot kitchen, and then move into here. I guess the one thing I would want to add before we sort of get into nuts and bolts is that, the reason that we did this is not necessarily because we were farm kids who were thinking of buckets of potatoes, but we did it because Aroostook County is an area that is enormous and is dominated by agriculture. So you have people up here who know how to grow things, who can grow at scale, and so all your raw products are there. And so what that means for us is Northern Girl represents an opportunity to create a leverage point in the food system. And part of that leverage point is, one, to put local food into a form that is more readily usable by institutions to try to lower the barrier for behavior change, which I know I'm preaching to the choir here. But the other characteristic of this leverage point is, if we could create a market, if we could create a vehicle to get into those markets, well, we have a leverage point to incentivize diversification of the crop rotations in Aroostook County. So instead of just being potatoes and grains on rotation, you can start to work in carrots, you can start to work in rutabaga, you can start to work in parsnips or beets. And these are all things that our soils are incredibly suited for, and it diversifies a bit of a farm picture. So it gives more choice. And just for contrast, the potato growers in our area who grow for McCain's, big processor, they're often growing for like 3 cents a pound, if that. And that's, when you talk to farmers who are in that model, you have to be big to survive, and you have to have big equipment if you're going to be that big, and that means you have to serve the payments on that equipment. So there's a real sort of pocketbook and self-agency and self-determination rationale behind diversification. So anyway, that's just kind of an overview of some of the philosophy of why we're doing what we do. I would say my other passion point is that people up here really know how to work. There's a strong work ethic. There's a tradition of knowing how to do agricultural work. So something that I'm really proud of working with the crew that's here, including Carl and Sue, who are participating in this today, is that we invested a lot in sort of making sure that our company culture is developing the people who work with us, who many times have not gone to higher education, or they don't have a ton of job prospects besides the carousel within town, from farmer to farmer to farmer, or the gas station to farmer to the gas station as an employment market. And what we've really seen is the more that we've invested in the people who work for us, the pride that they take in the work, the skills that they bring to the table, the discernment that they bring to grading, which can be a difficult thing to train into people, is just exemplary. So I'm really proud of the amount of pride that our team takes in the work that they do, because it's not glory work. It's not fancy, and you're not going to get rich doing it if you're working on a line chopping carrots or beets. But on the other hand, everything that we put out of here, everybody has been very committed to the food safety rules that we put in place, the quality standards that we put in place. They have soaked up everything that we have taught them or shared with them. They've really stepped into the opportunities to take leadership. So I guess that's something that, to me, I'm happy to answer more questions about that later, but it's one of the reasons why we're all the way up here instead of being closer to our markets. Okay.
Thank you, Leah. How did that come through? How's the audio and video? Can someone give me a report?
Perfect. Yeah, it's good.
Great. So we'd like to invite Carl Pratt, our plant manager, to first come in and say a few things about himself and how he came to Northern Girl. And then we're going to do a very quick walkthrough, and then we're going to move to a PowerPoint and talk a little bit more about our processes. Carl.
Okay, thank you, Leah. Thank you, Chris. My name's Carl Pratt. I've been the plant manager since the spring of 2015. I was hired in August of 2014. My background for the previous 16 years have been in textile as a production manager, and I'm schooled in lean manufacturing. Unfortunately, my textile plant closed down, so living here in Aroostook County, I need to find another job. I was looking on Indeed.com for jobs, and I saw this interesting little ad for a food processor up in Van Buren, Maine. So I sent in my resume. Next thing you know, Chris gave me a call. Not knowing what I was going to get myself into, I accepted his offer and I came to work. Between August and the spring of 2015, I learned all the processes, because prior to that, I had absolutely no experience in any kind of agricultural processing. When I first arrived, we kind of had a motley crew, a little bit of a revolving door with the crew. We set some standards. We did some workforce development, and the crew we have today are very skilled, very dedicated, and they do very high quality work. Next, I'd like to walk you through our plant, a very quick walkthrough, and let me show you what goes on here.
Looks good so far, you guys.
Nobody gets seasick, right?
Okay, we're going to start where everything begins and actually ends in the process. This is our loading dock. We have a dual function for our loading dock. It is our receiving and shipping area. When raw product is received, we inspect the product for conformity and temperature. We also use our loading dock to store our shipping supplies and some of our packing supplies. Okay, once we receive our product, it goes into our cooler. This is a 350 square foot cooler, which we store our raw product before processing, and we store some of our finished product after processing. Here's an example of some of our finished product. This is our fresh swab product, packed in 5-pound bags. These are our whole baby beans product, which are packed in 10-pound bags. This is an example of a full tote. About 2,000 pounds of jumbo carrots, and we get our carrots locally from our local farmers. We separate our kitchen into 3 sections. We have the back of the house where we are now, the middle of the house, and the front of the house. In the back of the house where we are now is where all our prep work happens. We keep all our cutting boards and utensils for our prep work. We use an inventory control method. Each one of our knives and peelers are stamped with numbers, which are recorded when they're taken out, and they are cross-referenced when they're put back to make sure that nothing is missing. We bring our product onto prep tables where we top or tail, From there, we peel our product. Then after that, still in the back of the house, we have an extensive quality control inspection table where a crew of possibly 8 can stand around taking away any kind of blemishes or throw out any kind of unaccepted product. Then we move to the middle of the house. Middle of the house is where we do all our processes. We have the capability of shredding, slicing, dicing, making fries. We also have the capability of sizing the product per customer requirements, whether it be 3/4 of an inch or our sticks. We also have the capability of dewatering our product. And also in the middle of the house, rather, we have our cooking section, which has our kettles. And we also have our combi oven, which has roll-in racks. So we can roll the product in, and we can roll the product out. Now we're in the front of the house. The front of the house is where our packing takes place. We have a packing table with 2 packing chutes. This is our vacuum sealer where we seal all our bags. Also in the front of the house, we have our dishwashing area where we wash and sanitize our dishes post-production, and we store all our sanitized equipment here. Once everything is packed and cased, or if it's in case of bulk like our 10-pound beads, we usually pack those on the day of shipping. However, if it's a frozen product, we have a 500 square foot freezer. We've been known to freeze it to store a capacity of 3,000 pounds at a time. If it's not a frozen product, and all the product goes back into the cooler, awaiting shipment, and then when shipping day comes, into the loading dock, onto the trucks. That's a really quick run through of the kitchen here. Now we'd like to take time with this little PowerPoint presentation. I'd like to speak about all the equipment here individually and processes. We'll speak about the processes. We'll speak about food safety, sanitation.
Great, thank you, Carl. We're going to switch it to the PowerPoint. Caitlin?
Sure thing. All right, take it over.
All right, the first thing you're looking at here is our Vanmark peeler. This peeler has 8 rollers, 4 grip rollers and 4 brushes. We position the rollers on the peeler can be varied to allow for an abrasive peel or a more gentler peel. The peeler was designed to operate as a continuous throughput, but we have modified that design by introducing a variable speed control to complement a batch processing, allowing a maximum peel weight of 350 pounds. Bear with us, we're having a little bit of technical issues here.
Caitlin, can you advance the slides, please?
All right, thank you, Caitlin. Here we have our quality control inspection table, or as we call it, our QC table. The QC table has a capacity for 8 crew members to perform quality checks on products after the peeling process. It has 4 chutes where the callings are deposited into bins placed under the table. Originally designed as a conveyor system, but for our rigorous quality standards, we manually push the product down the table towards the next process step. Have next slide, please. This is our Urschel Diversicut Sprint dicer. The Urschel dicer will cut uniform dices using interchangeable cutting parts, enables us to obtain cuts through a wide variety of sizes at high production capabilities. Our standard dice size is 3/8 inch cut up to 3/4 inch cuts. We also have the capacity to produce fries and slices. Here's an example of some of our interchangeable parts. Next slide, please. This is our Northstar Engineered Products Wedge Maestro. The NSEP wedger is designed to be fed from two sides. The cut rate is up to 500 cycles per minute. It has a capacity to produce 4 to 8 wedge cuts, and the process can be sequenced with the programmable controller. Next, please. This is our IsoFlow key shaker table. The shaker table is utilized to separate the uniform cut products from the shards and the pieces created during the dicing process. This is obtained through vibration of a stationary frame. We have two different separation grades. One with a punch plate that has 11/16 openings for a uniform 3/4 inch cut dice product, and the other punch plate that has a 15/16 inch opening for a uniform 1 inch diced product. We also use this process to separate the small pieces of carrots when we're producing carrot sticks. Next, please. Thank you. Cronin spinner. This piece of equipment is used in the dewatering process. It has time and speed controls that allow for a variation of dewatering rates. The maximum weight allowance is 25 pounds per cycle. These are our tilt skillets. 2 tilt skillets used in our cooking process for beets and canning. The maximum capacity of the 2 skillets are 75 gallons of liquid. They have the capacity to cook about 320 pounds of beets in a batch. They tilt forward for emptying. The larger skillet is powered by propane gas, and the smaller skillet is powered by electricity. On the left here, you see our Rational combi oven. This is a versatile oven with a self-cleaning option. We use this oven primarily for blanching with clean steam and baking. We use portable oven racks that have the capacity to hold 200 pounds of product for each cook cycle. The oven also has a 7-minute cool down cycle to stop the product from continuing to cook after the allowed process time. This is our Copeland Freeze Bot. It's a blast freeze. This unit is equipped with an option to blast freeze product or as a refrigeration unit. We have the capability to blast freeze up to 2,000 pounds of product in a 2-hour period. We utilize the blast freezer for all our frozen product line. Now we'd like to take you through a couple of our processes. Next, please. Okay, this is our fresh cut process for carrot processing. This is our crew. This is what Lee and I were talking about, a very skilled crew. It's not a very large crew, but they're very dedicated into producing a quality product in an efficient amount of time. Next, please. All right, this is our doffing, the raw product. We receive raw products, as you've seen before, in about 2,000-pound tote bags. We doff the product into manageable 100-pound increments. Next, please. As you can see, the product is not USDA grade A quality. So the product is then taken to prep stations for topping and initial QC. This is our peeler. The top carrots are introduced into the peeler. The peel time is approximately 7 minutes. The peeler does a very good job, but it doesn't do a 100% complete job. So after the peel, the product is QC'd by the crew. Any blemishes and left peels are removed and sent down the line for processing. One of the processes we have is shredding. We use a Robocoup with a shredding blade. We shred into dipping baskets for further processing. Another process with our carrots is preparing carrot sticks. Carrots are cut into sticks. Approximately 250 pounds of sticks can be processed in 3 minutes through this earthing. Next, to make uniform sized sticks, we use our shaker table. Carrot sticks are placed on the shaker table. The small pieces are separated. The remaining sticks are deposited into dipping baskets in cold water. Here's an example of one of our critical control points. It's a documentation. This certain one documents that we tested for the correct parts per millions of a parasitic acid solution. Each dipping solution, parasitic acid solution, has to be changed after 3,000 pounds of product and has to be retested. 300 pounds, I'm sorry, 300 pounds of product, and then it has to be retested. When we do our sanitation tip for our fresh cut vegetables, we use a timer, and it's according to our we time according to our critical control point, and there's a 90-second dip time. This is our dipping in our parasitic acid solution. And this is our dewatering. For our sticks, we dewater the carrots for a 2-second spin. Product is then removed and transferred into totes. Totes are placed into refrigeration, waiting packing. Packed into 5-pound bags by one crew member, then they are vacuum sealed and boxed by another crew member, and then they are placed into the cooler awaiting shipping. Here's some of our finished product of our sticks and our shreds. Ready to eat baby beets. This process is similar in ways to the carrots, but different in ways also. Once again, we doff the raw product that usually comes in 2,000-pound tote bags. We doff them into manageable 100-pound totes. Then the product is transferred to the prepping station. At the prepping station, each individual beet is tailed and topped. Then we go to our to the peeler. We peel about 300 pounds of beets in a 7-minute time cycle. The beets are removed from the peeler and sent to the tilt skillets. This is all about cooking and cooling. Beets are placed into the tilt skillets, cooked in a vinegar and water brine. Cook time is 90 minutes. Beets are strained from the tilt skillets. Beets are placed into dipping baskets and soaked in cold water. When the beets reach 65 degrees, they are removed from the dipping barrels and placed in a 10-to-1 ratio of vinegar and water brine, and they are brined overnight. Beets are then drained and placed onto a packing table. They're packed in 10 or 5-pound bags and vacuum sealed, and then they are placed in the cooler to wait shipping. Sanitation, food safety is built on a framework on controlling potential contaminants. Sanitation is a key food safety requirement and therefore must be performed properly. We train our crew on food safety and sanitation protocols monthly. This is our dishwashing area. All dishes and utensils and kitchen supplies used during production are washed in hot water using detergent and then sanitized with a peracetic acid solution. At the end of each production run, we wash all the equipment using an alkaline-based detergent, then a degreaser, and finalize the cleaning with a peracetic acid solution. Okay, now on to shipping. Once again, back into the loading dock. Where everything begins, this is where it ends. The office manager generates the shipping packing list. This includes the items being shipped, the amount of each item, the best use by date, and production lot number for traceability. The shipping crew takes the packing list and prepares the shipment. Some product is packed in boxes during production, and bulk product is packed into cardboard crates. Then the palletized packaged product is shrink wrapped and ready for shipping. Then we will load the distributor's trucks. Normally our shipments go out on Mondays mornings. A little bit about our production waste. During the production process, we generate significant peelings and other production waste. The surplus of this waste is placed into totes and then are placed into larger compost control bins. Local farmers periodically pick up the production waste to feed locavores or used as compost. Food safety. This is something that's very, very, very important to us here at Northern Girl. Northern Girl has a comprehensive food safety management system. Every month we review the food safety rules that form our good manufacturing practices. We review non-conformance reports and their corrective actions, and review food defense, which is security, allergens, and worker health and hygiene. Each training session is about 2 hours in length. Here's our Primus GFS third-party certification. Northern Girl achieved the Primus GFS certification in May of 2015. After the initial audit in April, we scored a 97% with 8 non-conformance reports. We performed corrective actions and our final score was 99% out of a possible 100%. This is our library of good manufacturing practices. All HACCP plans, our standard operating procedures, sanitation standard operating procedures, safety data sheets, and hazardous communications program is located in the office and is available for all crew members to use as reference. Here's an example of our food safety documentation and our traceability. The documentation is for traceability and for receiving, to critical control points verification, to our packing and our shipping. We have our own in-house environmental monitoring system. We use an ATP system. And boy, I'll tell you what, that was rough. That was quite challenging. When we first started doing our ATP testing, we failed every time. So what this slide is kind of a timeline and a goal we set, which we did reach our goal of 100% ATP passing. It started out with us failing, instant investigation of why. You know, we played around with our sanitation sanitizers. They were tested. Then we introduced our detergents. We used 2 detergents, so it took some time to figure out that we needed both detergents, and we also needed our parasitic acid solution. We were still not quite passing 100%, so we concentrated on our hard to reach places on equipment. We still weren't passing all that great, and then we set up, we actually tested the ATP swabs to make sure that they were calibrated and they were right, until finally we got the right combination. Now I'm confident every time when I ATP test that everything will pass. And I thank you for your time. Does anybody have any questions?
If you do, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask them directly.
Hey, thanks so much, guys. This is Nathaniel. I was curious about the other critical control points in your process. You mentioned the dip time and logging that. What are some of the other ones that you focus on?
The question was, what are some of our other critical control points besides dip time?
Okay, dip time, critical control points, as you saw, we use a parasitic acid solution for fresh. Now our beans, obviously, whether we cook, blanch, bake, or boil our beans, the critical control point is temperature. Of course, the FDA recommends a temperature of internal temperature of 165 degrees Fahrenheit. Our beans we cook beyond that to a 212 degrees, exceeding the 165 required. But the reason we do that is more for the quality of the taste.
Time and temperature.
There's time and temperature also.
So that, hold on a second. Sorry if that was blurry. So this is one of the things that was actually a corrective action we had to take at our Primus, our third-party audit, is that we had a critical control point for the cooking temperature, but we didn't have time at temperature, which is required to sort of like specify, are you actually cooking it long enough, or are you just peaking at that temperature and it's not long enough to control microbial growth, basically. So that's something that we modified in a couple of them. So the CCP for the cooked products, as he was mentioning, is time at temperature. For our frozen, you can switch back to Carl, but we have one for our frozen product. We have a CCP that's time at temperature.
Oh, right. One CCP is when we do our blanching, internal temperature again, is at 165. Once it reaches 165, we're required to hold that temperature for a minimum of 15 seconds. And then we walk it into our glass freezer, and we have a minimum time of freezing of 2 hours. After that 2 hours, we take an internal probe and we set the standard of 19 degrees internal temperature before we pack that product.
And we had to modify, so we do fiddleheads. We designed a process to do food safety controls, to do fresh fiddleheads in a retail package. Similarly, we had to do a separate CCP from our dip process for our other fresh vegetables because the concentration is different. So that was something that we had to make a fourth one. Yeah.
Thank you for such a comprehensive answer.
Sure. What's next?
I've got another one if nobody else wants to jump in here. I think this is fascinating. You showed us an example of the pack list and looked like maybe a bill of lading or something that would go out with the shipment. I'm curious what you're using for inventory control software.
Okay, the question is, sorry it's blurry, what are we using for inventory control software? Sue, you should get in this one too. So traceability would be kind of the question, and inventory control.
Right, inventory control and traceability, as far as everything is traced back to that lot number. We like to go forward and backward, which means that any lot number, any product that a farmer brings in, we have a lot number that's that's traceable, whether he has his own lot number or we have a method to create a lot number based on that farmer and what the product is. Once that comes in, that number will be associated with that lot number, which is what is defined for traceability through the entire shop. And then once it leaves the shop to wherever it goes, anything related to that lot number, we have all the information in the office.
And Sue, what do you use for a database? Since you don't really use software, what do you use instead?
We just use Excel. Excel will control everything that comes in as far as our lot number. And inventories, our product inventory is done monthly, and that's also maintained in Excel.
And we also, I won't flip this to me, but we have an offsite CFO who runs our QuickBooks file. So when we do inventory, we print out a worksheet. We usually modify it for things that we have that aren't items in QuickBooks yet, and then we send it back to our CFO in spreadsheet form so he can upload that, and he keeps that live that way. The databases that Sue was mentioning, she has several spreadsheets for production lot tracking. So we keep, as she said, we have receiving lot numbers that go on all the raw products. We have production batch lot numbers. And so she keeps really two to cross-reference backwards and forward so that we can trace anything either way. Part of our food safety program, we have to do annual mock recalls. And so that's a test of our process. And that's really helped us kind of think through what are some of the scenarios that we might have to figure out.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question about your work. You talked about it. You have so much.
I'm sorry, that's completely breaking up. I can't hear what the question is.
Can you hear me?
I think that's better, Melissa. Try again.
Peeler.
Okay, not so good. Hey, Alyssa, we can't really understand you. Could you put your question in the chat box? We'll take another question and come back to yours. Great, thanks. Anyone else?
I had a question. I was wondering, it seems like you have a lot of equipment that is really set up for larger scale production, and I'm curious about your plans for growth or any of your barriers to increased production.
You guys just saw Carl's wonderful expression on his face. So a lot of our equipment could be maximized to run as sort of a continuous flow, but we purposely have it set up as a batch process, so we don't have a ton of conveyors connected or hoists or lifts or things like that. So we do that on purpose because we switch between products so much, and that gives us the versatility in the line. So we're not doing the batch process just because we want to be anachronistic. It kind of matches what our sales are. So the question of barriers for getting to larger scale, I think that this is something that's common across the sector. There's a challenge with sales, and part of that is
Looks like we're frozen.
is that there's sometimes a challenge with getting access to the decision makers. So I think anybody who runs a processing plant could tell you that if you got a contract for a university system, for example, which then it becomes much easier to make your plans. It becomes much easier to expand. But getting in to access those decision makers, those buyers, and then getting them to make a decision in your favor is challenging. And at our location, we have another layer of challenge, which is the geographic distance from our markets. So as people define their local, whether they do that at 250 miles or whatever it may be, we're outside of that. Even though we're definitely feeding into a main economy, just the straight miles, I mean, we're probably, I think we're about 300 miles even from Portland, which makes that under the local programs which have more price support. Chris, I don't know if you want to speak to that or not. Some of our plans, just to look at as we've sort of dealt with these challenges, our Fiddlehead project is something that we'd like to replicate, not necessarily with Fiddleheads itself. We have room to scale our Fiddlehead project, but because it's a process itself of doing product development of something that is incredibly unique, utilizing our sort of world-class, at the end of a dirt road, food safety system to provide like the large buyers who want this product with the sort of risk mitigation that we can provide by running it through our facility. Looking at that, we also did a pickled Fiddlehead project. I think what we're seeing is that there's a profile of a different type of product that is unique, so that it's not under so much price pressure from commodity interchangeable crops that we're never going to be able to compete with. So the more sort of niche we can go, the more we can profile things. Like we've looked at the Fiddlehead and some of our other products that we think are successful are things that we can do. Chris, you might pull this together. We can make a 30% margin on it, right? Remember that?
Right. Well,
and then there's a volume of sales that we can do.
Sure. 30% margin, gross margin, is our minimal goal.
Right.
I really think if you want to enter a market, you really need to find 45% margins, just because of the cost of the soft dollars necessary, the marketing programs of your distributors. And what we've found is some of these, even the carrot stick project, for instance, that's probably the minimal. We have enough volume that we can get some margins there, but we really are searching for those, maybe with a little higher value, that we get a little better price support, so we can enter a new market at the appropriate margin, so we can have a chance of success.
But so to test a product to know if it's going to be one that works for us, we know that we have to hit a gross margin, we have to hit a gross volume of sales, and our raw product input costs usually can't be more than 30 cents a pound, right? So like these are super basic, and may not be, your mileage may vary on this, but that's what we found as we get into it. So some of these, we have products that meet this, we have products that don't yet, and some of those that don't yet, it's like, okay, we know, for instance, we have a 6-ingredient medley. If we can do production runs of a certain volume, it hits those metrics. You know, so you may have different performance on those different measures, but it's developing the profile of a successful product that lets us evaluate things before we get into it. We've done a lot of product iteration, and Chris has really taken that on. Like, I think our first year we had like 50 or 60 SKUs of stuff that was being made in tiny batches at a time by hand. And so, like, if you don't want to do that, when you have a fully trained crew, when you have overhead or whatever else, doing our sort of data analysis and looking at what we've done so far and trying to figure out some of this ahead of time is part of what we're looking at now as we say, all right, so what are the plans that we have to build volume on which products, and which products are not worth building volume on at all? Like, Carl, right? I want you to talk generally about Sunday production. All the stuff that we know, no matter what the volume is.
Okay, our Sunday production, we do numerous different products, whether it be carrot shreds, carrot sticks, our root slaw. We do mirepoix.
All the things we don't want to do, you can name them.
Yeah, you know, mirepoix, and sometimes the individual ingredients of mirepoix, whether it be celery, onions, diced carrots. We've been known to do fresh 3/4-inch diced carrots, 3/8-inch diced carrots. So there's many different changeovers on the machine. Even though the peeler stays the same, the prep work usually is the same. It comes to the dicing, which would have to change out different heads for different dice cuts. Not only that, like for the mirror paw, with the Urschel, after, if we're doing individual ingredients, after the onions, we have to wash it. After the carrots, we have to wash it. After, the celery, we have to wash it. So it's very laborious, and
so one thing that we do is every production run, we run a P&L on it. And that's our shorthand way of saying we run the data on what were the raw, like how many pounds of raw ingredients did we use, what was the yield on it, what was the labor that we used, and we have a target for the margin we want to make on it. And so what we find is that if we isolate it by batch, we can see there are products, we exceed the margin that we want every single time. There are some that we see, if we hit the volume, we hit our metric. But the Sunday production that we're talking about this day, never beats it, never will, no matter how much volume we get. I mean, that may be exaggerated, but I think that's true. So we got 2 more questions. I don't want to take too much time, but I hope that gives some more information on your question.
Thanks, you guys. Okay, so there's a question from the Western Mass Food Processing Center team from Joanna. John, you're welcome to ask it if you'd like, or I can chime in. You just have to unmute yourself. I can't hear you.
You can't hear me very well. So
okay. Okay, we're good now, John. Oh, there's an echo. Okay, I'll just ask it. So the question from the Western Mass Food Processing Center is, so some equipment does 75 pounds of food at a time, and other equipment does 25 pounds at a time. They're wondering if there are any backups in production for that reason.
oh, what the bottlenecks are? We tried. There are bottlenecks, and the bottlenecks start with. It kind of depends on the quality of the product, whether it be carrots or whatnot. If it's we try to use as much of that product as we can. So during the QC process, that is our biggest bottleneck. The Urschel will kind of make up because it's so efficient. And then like the dipping process, where we can only use 25 pounds at a time, can be a bottleneck, but usually is not because of the short amount of time. Like a 2-2 dewatering cycle is basically just a 2-second spin. So you put the basket in, shut the lid, 2 seconds, pull it out, throw it into the tote.
I think the question is about when pieces of equipment or steps of the process have different flow rates. How do you manage the different flow rates so it's not built like backing up? So like when you do potatoes, for example, we have an additional anti-browning step that takes longer. How do you manage the flow so it keeps going through? I'm not sure that's your question, John, but it sounded like it.
Well, like I said, we do it in batches. So we have to control the amount of batch we have. Otherwise, we have incredible bottlenecks. I think that's probably the best answer I can give you.
One thing that we do is we know which steps are the slow ones, and we try to maximize the day for those. So when we're doing a 6-ingredient medley and one of those ingredients has an extra slow step because of anti-browning, we do that one first. So we push that through the line first thing because we know it's slow, because everything else is just starting at the beginning of the line while we're working through the anti-browning step. So by the time the first fast products are through, then we've got the slow one out of the way and we keep it moving. But the real answer is that Carl does a lot of process flow planning. So he thinks about who he needs, how many people, and where they're going to be and what the timing is. And sometimes we stagger start times for different tasks.
Great. Okay, thanks, you guys. I think that answered their question well. Alyssa had a question. I'm going to mention it. Well, let's check in on time first off. I think we're supposed to go until 12:30. Is that right, you guys? All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and ask Alyssa's question. She wasn't sure if there would be time, but she said, you mentioned modifying the peeler. The Center for an Ag Economy has a similar piece with a variable speed. But can you briefly explain your process for troubleshooting speed and weight that is ideal for the process?
That's a great question.
That's a great question. Our variable speed is a Yakasha variable speed. It has preset parameters that are programmed in so that we try to make it as user-friendly for the operator. Some peelers, like I said, are used for continuous flow through, so basically all they need is an on and off switch. Ours I control by speed, and the timing is usually done with timers.
And how do you figure out how long you're going to run something through and how much weight you load into it?
We don't like to put in any more than 300 pounds because then it seems there's an increased time, build time. 300 pounds, just from experience, we have found is a the good amount that we need. The timing varies from different items. Carrots we peel from anywhere from 5 to maybe 8 minutes, depending on the carrot and the skin of the carrot. Beets, we start off with a 2-minute on a slow speed. We go to a 3-minute on a high speed. We back off the speed for another 2-minute peel. So the answer to your question is it depends on the product. And basically the way we came to what speed and time is basically just from experience and doing it and finding out which works, which doesn't.
The other thing is that we cross-trained our different position tiers. So when we made an operations transition from Chris running everything, starting everything up, to getting to a place where Carl could step in as a plant manager, there's a certain amount of work we had to do to make that actually possible. And one of the things that we did is we set up different position tiers, we trained people to it, and we cross-trained within the position. So everyone who's the skilled processing crew, they know how to run all of the equipment that is more skilled and is more dangerous. The prep crew basically are just doing topping and tailing and different tasks like that. They're not trained in the equipment. So I would say that the peeler is actually the one, well, it's not really true. It's one of the pieces of equipment that takes sort of a specialized amount of experience. So we have a guy who is most of the time the one running the peeler. He's trained in the other equipment, the other people are trained in running it. But if they need to know, like, what should we be doing for carrots, they're gonna ask him. And he works with the shift leader pretty closely, who have the product knowledge, more like vegetable quality knowledge, and that's a lot of how we developed that. Just as a quick side note, the other piece of equipment that is specialized in terms of who gets to touch it or not is the Urschel. And that's not just because it's super dangerous, but it is super dangerous. It's also because those heads are so expensive and high maintenance and high needs that you have to do it right. If you drop it even just gently on the floor, like you could ding a blade, you could produce a metal shard, you could create enough of a fault that putting it in a high speed, high torque machine could cause a problem when you start it. So we control that even though people are cross-trained in doing it. We don't let just anybody mess around with it.
Sounds smart. Okay, thanks you guys. Another question from the Western Mass Food Processing Center team. They're wondering if you do broccoli, and if so, how do you turn it into florets?
Yes, we do broccoli. We do broccoli. We hand floret. We do it all by hand.
A lot of work.
It is a lot of work, but one thing I can say about our crew here, they're very, very focused. So we can actually do about 2,000 pounds floretic maybe in 4 hours before we go on through with either straight to packing or whether we blanch it and freeze it.
I see. Okay, great. Also, they're wondering, question from Joanna, do you have a metal detector?
That we do not.
So this is part of why we have the inventory control on all of our metal blades. We don't have a metal detector. It's not something we can afford to do at any stage so far. So as far as putting together our food safety plans, we rely a lot on inspections. So we have a couple of places where inspection happens. One, controlling all the blades, including peelers. Like we were losing peeler blades for a while. And like one time the farmer who takes the scraps is a friend of mine. I stopped by and he showed me a ladle that made its way out. And I was probably not supposed to tell those stories, but we realized we had to really like make it controlled. So that's something that is one of our documentation forms. They get checked in and they get checked out and they get inspected at multiple points throughout the day. We have equipment checks, safety and condition checks before we get started. That's another documentation form. Our packing table we use for inspection as well, so that the packing crew is expected to be looking for any foreign materials. We have a foreign materials policy, so if they find a scrap of glove or anything else, they know what they need to do to isolate it and tag it. So it's not a metal detector, but we try to, like I said, really invest in the people that we have because they're the best asset that we have.
Totally. Okay, great. Joanna said they have many of the same challenges.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, not great that you have them, but camaraderie.
Right. Okay, other questions? Feel free to type them in the chat box or unmute yourself and ask directly. Peter. Okay, what is one thing that would make make operations go better, like new markets or more equipment, or what's your wish list?
What would make operations go better? Anything from sales, equipment?
I think volume is very important. The smaller the volume, actually the smaller the more work, believe it or not. I think so from the sales standpoint, we'd like to see higher sales. I don't know of any company that wouldn't. I could have a wish list a mile long of things I would like to see.
What's your top 5 for the plans? Or your top 5 wish lists for the plan?
Oh, wow. I think actually the first thing to come to mind are simple things like more rolling racks. It would be really nice to have an automated dishwasher, even though our crew does a fantastic job.
An automated packaging machine, like weighing packaging, would be incredible operationally. Like some of our equipment is getting aged, our tilt skillets are, and I'd like to see those. The gas kettle.
The gas kettle. And make them uniform as far as the power supply. Instead of one being gas and one being electricity. Also, our tilt skillets have lost the capability of temperature control, so they're either boiling or they're off. I could keep going.
I think that as I look at the line, I think the bookends would be a major, like those are both big investment pieces, but they would be really increase what we could do. So having like a pre-wash step before entering the line, or just having capability to have like an agitation wash tank for things like metalheads, like that would be amazing. And it would open up different types of perishable products that we don't currently do, because we're not set up for handling that kind of thing. If we can't put it through a peeler, we're probably not doing it, and the peeler's pretty rough. So that's one bookend, and then the other bookend would be the automated weighing and packaging. Those would be the biggest things on my wish list.
Great. Okay. In terms of marketing or reaching new buyers, what do you think could go better? How could you sell more product, particularly to institutions?
So we mostly, almost all of our products going to institutions, colleges, and K through 12 schools. What did I do? So I think that the challenge is all the colleges, I've gone to dozens of colleges in Maine and in the Boston area, and I'm always well received. It's always nice. I try to do a little top down and a little bottom up. So the higher up you go, the more welcome I tend to be, and I've often gotten buy-in at the high level. because we tell a good story, and everybody wants to help our farmers and keep our staff employed. So that's sometimes an easy one to do, and you can get support on that. But at some point, you got to go down, and then there's this buyer somewhere who really doesn't want to deal with another vendor, and he doesn't understand why the cost is so much higher. So that's probably the biggest bridge we have to deal with here. On the ground reality of our costs are higher, which means we have to charge more. We're competing against big ag and the commodity products. The carrot stick product that we sell thousands of pounds a week to many K-12 schools, we charge approximately, get them delivered, $1.80 a pound. Any school can buy a California so-called baby carrot for about $1 a pound. So that is the dilemma that we're dealing with. How does a school justify paying $1.80 for a Maine-grown carrot versus the commodity California? So we all need to figure that out. Part of that's going to be is getting to scale. We think our costs will come down as our growers get better, and as we get better, and we can invest in some of the automation we just talked about. Will there always be a divide? I don't know. We're very happy to kind of continue. We think we're going to get lower costs, and we hope the market will absorb higher prices.
Gotcha. Okay, great. Yeah, it's hard to deal with that 80-cent difference, isn't it, per pound for those carrots? All right. Other questions? Okay. I wonder, Peter or Chris, do you want to do a little wrap up?
Well, sure. Well, thank you so much. I hope it was worthwhile and you enjoyed this little webinar. So we'll be signing off from Van Buren. Feel free to email me, and we'll pass on any more questions to the crew. And you can always call. Thanks, everybody.
All right, wonderful. Thanks for joining. Peter, you're on mute. Do you want to say something? Oh, you're good.
Just chiming in from Vineland. Thanks again, you guys. That was great, and thanks for putting up with the helping to work through the technical issues. I think there's some great clips within this that we could, if we could figure out a way to pull out and make it available elsewhere, but really helps complete the process of seeing all the different facilities, having a chance to hear more about your unique opportunities and assets and challenges. And to everyone, we'll be getting information out with the video and the case studies soon. And then I think we have February 17th for our final wrap-up call. I think that'll be great, and we'll send information about that.
Yeah, February 16th at 11 o'clock.
Thanks.
Yeah. All right, sounds good. Robin says, thanks, Chris and everyone. Hope you all enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll talk again soon.
So long.
All right, bye-bye.